Hello everybody, welcome, I'm Noah2. Thank you for watching this video. I'm here to talk to you about your inventory. We've all seen it, we've all felt it, we've all experienced it, we've all seen other people cry about it in the Twitch chats. They go, oh, my inventory is full, I don't know what to sell, I don't know what to keep. Here to talk to you about that specifically. Now, I'm not going to get all nitty-gritty with the details like, oh, you should keep exactly 24 of these and 43 medical supply boxes because you'll need them for your level 7 upgrades. Like, we're not going to worry about that. What is the general fundamentals of managing your inventory here? Some tips and tricks to deal with that, right? So the first general rule of thumb is, and we're going to break this down, and be sure to check the timestamps because there'll be a summary at the end, but the general rule of thumb here is, let's say early game, mid game, late game. In the early game, we want one stack of everything. As much diversity as we can manage with one stack of everything. So be sure though to be upgrading your inventory space over time, because as you do that, it's going to save you time. Selling things in the game is not that lucrative. If you can keep a stack of something and then have it ready to go for turning in for a quest, that will always be more lucrative than just having a stack of something and then selling it straight to the vendor. So if you want to min-max and get the most value out of your looting time, like time spent looting to value gained, looting an item and then turning it in for a quest is always better. Always better. Though for some of the jobs, it's not really worth your time to turn in 10 compound sheets and whatever it is, 20 hydraulic pistons, like that's not worth your time. But in the most general sense, for the main quests, for the main storylines, to make progress through the game, turning in the items is always better than just selling them straight up. So in the early game, we want one stack of everything as much as we can manage. If you're desperate for space, of course, you can sell things that are more common and keep things that are less common and things like that. That's all sort of varies between player experience and stuff like that. Right, but we want one stack of everything. The only exception that we might want to have is crafting items. And again, you'll learn what you need to keep for crafting items, things like that. You can go look at the crafter and see what you need and memorize it slowly over time. But for crafting items, you might want 2 to 3 stacks of them. In the early game, probably maybe 1 to 2 stacks, if at all. Maybe just 1 still, right? But then we move on to the mid game. Now there's something very important to note here, is that just about everything will be used at least once or twice for your jobs and your hideout. About once or twice, with some exceptions. Right? Everything will be used at least once for a main mission to some degree, maybe a couple of times for each of the factions, and everything will be used about once in the hideout, in a very general sense, right? Because we sort of know this in a very general sense, right? As we begin to use things, right? Let's say in the early game you turn in, a bunch of compound sheets, a couple to Korolev, a couple to ICA. You'd use them for the hideout. The chances of you needing to have compound sheets later on begins to drop. And especially because compound sheets are a common item and they really are common and easy to find. As you sort of move on into the mid game, start selling the stuff that you've used in your hideout or for your missions. Because chances of you needing it again become pretty much slim to none. Right? So as we're moving into that mid game, we're selling off the items now that we've already used for missions or the hideout. But what about the things we haven't used yet? You might have some medical supplies, and you might think, is it just a crafting item? No. It is not just a crafting item. Remember, everything is used at least once or twice for your missions or for your hideout. So once you get to the mid game, you're selling off the stuff you've already used. You got other items though you haven't used yet for a mission or for your hideout. At this point, we want to move up from having 1 stack of it to 2 stacks of it. because as you progress through the game will begin demanding more and more stuff from you. Especially your hideout. It pretty much goes up in quantity for just about everything over time. So in the mid-game, we're keeping 2 stacks of the items that we haven't used yet for questing or the hideout. And for our crafting items, we're keeping 2 to 3 stacks of it to keep a nice crafting economy going. In the late game, same principle applies. If we haven't used it yet for a quest or for our hideout, we should probably hold on to it, having as many stacks of it as possible, really. And again, for the stuff that we have already used multiple times on different occasions, begin selling it off. Begin selling it off. You don't really need it anymore. There are some exceptions I will talk about in a little bit, though. So in the late game, we're keeping the items that we still haven't used yet for questing. And we're still keeping crafting items. Maybe you now are fine with having, instead of 2 to 3, you have a constant 3 stack of all your crafting items and just having a super solid economy foundation to fall back on. You begin to lose all your gear and stuff. The other thing to manage is, of course, the gear. I would say, personally, I feel like I have just on the edge of a little bit too much gear and too many guns. I had way more. I had like 3 rows of blue armor and 3 rows of green armor because of the way I was playing. I was just looting it all the time, prioritizing it over everything. And it turns out I couldn't get rid of it. It took forever. It took forever to just put on this armor and chase gunshots and try to take fights and lose it and be greedy and things like that. And even sell some of it. Gear and guns are not lucrative to sell at all. They're hard to pick up in mission or in raid because they weigh so much. So really, if you're going to take gear or keep gear, you gotta use it. You gotta use it because otherwise it's just not worth it. Just not worth it to loot it and sell it. But of course, as we make progress in the late game, how much gear and stuff like that you can keep gets higher and higher because, again, there's a lot of stuff here that I need to sell off. I wanted to keep it just, for example, like I should be selling off the compound sheets, I should be selling off this extra stack of copper wire, things like that. Because I've already used almost all of that sort of stuff for quests and missions, and it's so easy to find it anyways, it's really no worry it's really not necessary to keep a stack of it. The only other exception is that there are some jobs, some repeatable missions, that I do like to keep stacks for. Even though, that being the only reason. One of them is like, I like having magic grow fertilizer. That's 1 stack of it. Because the ICA has a medium mission that says turn in 8 magical fertilizer. So if I have 10 of it, I can insta turn in that quest every so often that I get it, right? It's all RNG, the missions cycle out once a day, so it's not, I'm not desperately keeping all kinds of magic grow fertilizer for that mission, but every once in a while when it turns up, I'll just, a quick turn in, no problem. Now when I'm in raid and I'm looting, and I happen to be going through like woodcutter's camp, and I see some magical fertilizer and I go, and if I can remember if I have any or not, I'll pick up 1, maybe 2, and then move on and just not worry about it. Or if I have that quest available, but I don't have the fertilizer, I know where to get it, right? And I'll go loot it specifically, right? So there's some items, I can't really go over them or want to go over them necessarily, that you might, there's some quests that you're going to like, some jobs that you're going to like, and sort of go, oh yeah, I know how to get that stuff, it's real easy. Maybe keep an extra stack of those, even though you don't need them for the main storyline or for your hideout, right? Another example is the nutrition bars. ICA again has another quest, a hard mission, turn in 10 nutrition bars for like 31 scripts and a crap ton of credits or whatever, and it's just like, oh, cool. There are some little exceptions like that as far as the jobs go. But the general summary of it all is, in the early game, 1 stack of everything, because we'll need everything at some point. But as you begin to use it, Sell off the stuff that you've used and utilized already, because they won't really come up again a lot in the later missions or later part of your hideout. But also too, in the early game, a lot of the stuff called upon is the common items. So it makes it doubly easy to sell the common items off, because a lot of this stuff is super easy to find in general. As you begin to move into the mid game, items that you haven't used yet for a mission or for your hideout, you should be moving up to 2 stacks of it, because you sort of get to this point where the game does call upon more quantity from you. In the late game, same rule applies. If we've used it for on multiple missions or for the hideout, begin selling it. Things that you haven't used yet, continue to hold on to, and make sure that you have just as many stacks as possible, because sometimes it's a real pain in the butt when they're like, can you bring us 10 meteor cores, Keck W or whatever, and you're like, oh god. Gear, it's up to you how much you want to keep. Just keep in mind that sometimes gear is slow to lose, poor to sell. It can take up a lot of space very quickly. The other thing to keep in mind is crafting items. We want to have sort of a little flow economy of crafting items, so keep as much as you want of a particular type, right? I like having 2 to 3 poly prefabricates and 2 to 3 spinal bases, so I can always have a constant flow of green body armor. And the last final trick, safe pockets. Script, it weighs nothing. It takes up nothing in our safe pockets, but it takes up one of our slots in our inventory. We go from 187 to 188 when we have this script in here. So you can save yourself 2-3 spaces by putting your script in your safe pockets. Same goes for old currency. You really only need about 1 stack of old currency for the most part, maybe 2, I think, between your hideout and your main quest line. Other than that, you should just sell it. And I just have a fat load stack here because it's fun. I don't know. It's like collecting it. So I hope this helps. I hope that was a good summary. Let me know if you're still confused or have questions. I'd love to answer them. But, man, videos like this, I always just feel so rambly. Like, I want to summarize again so you understand it. But I believe in you. If you're not, please just rewatch the summary part of it all. And I'll see you guys in the future.